was completely unscripted, but if you don't mind, I'll just show people how it works. So you gave the
No, go ahead.
theoretical and the standard version. So here's an NFC padlock. It's fully metal, nice heavy duty. And I'm just gonna hold these together. I'm gonna hit unlock. The phone is transmitting power and you hear it click and there we go, it's open. All right, well, I'm here today with Mike McCamon. He's the executive director of the NFC Forum. Mike, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you, Jacob.
So I just, you're leading a really important industry group here. NFC Forum has been doing a lot of things for almost a couple of decades now, I think. Can you tell us a little bit more about NFC Forum and your role within the NFC Forum?
Sure. Well, I mean, to say that I'm leading, by the way, is a little generous. So I kind of try to marshal us all in the same direction and follow the leadership of others as well. So the NFC Forum is a 2 decades old organization. We'll be celebrating our 20th anniversary coming up this fall. The organization basically is a standards-based organization who's looking to find ways to develop high volume use cases for NFC technologies and a very strong emphasis on wearables and mobile devices. So when you pay with contactless, that's NFC, but that's a little bit outside of our domain. We're really more focused on when those technologies live on mobile devices. The technology itself has been around for quite some time. It's both on basic standards from ISO and others. And we did a survey recently. And by the way, this survey is available on our website if people would like to get it. We partner with ABI every other year on a usage and lifestyles kind of thing around contactless. And what we found is that customers are rating NFC as the most secure, the most reliable, the most convenient, and the easiest way to pay. In fact, 55% of people prefer using their mobile phone or their handset to pay if they're contactless payers today. And it's quite remarkable how things have been changing. Really, what our goal is right now, you think of contactless payment as like use case number one. The idea here is to build new killer use cases on top of an installed base that's basically built into every mobile phone already.
Yeah, count me as one of the people that prefers tap to pay. I actually got a car recently that you don't need a key anymore and your key is your phone. And because of that, I've noticed I can just leave my wallet at home now because I know wherever I'm going, I can tap to pay. It also gets me into the car.
Not yet. Not yet. Not everywhere. Not everywhere yet. But yeah, this is the future promise. And really one of the slides I do if I'm at a major conference is I'll talk about we're on the path of ubiquitous digital wallet. And the idea is that you carry all your credentials in your mobile device for either paying or getting into a door or getting into a concert. And depending upon where you go, you do get to use the technology. It's not universal today. And that's part of our job is to find ways to do it. Now, by the way, the thing I was saying, we're getting into this one with power. What I have found over my 30 or so year career in tech, I previously was the executive director, actually the first executive director for the Bluetooth Special Interest Group over 20 years ago. I worked on Wi-Fi and GSMA back in the day. I worked on ultra wideband for a while. I'm now, of course, working on NFC. And the way you get ubiquity is through standards. One company cannot do it on their own. And I think a lot of younger developers these days kind of take a look at, look at Google and Facebook and all these big companies. They've done everything they need to, and it's just themselves. They don't realize that those companies wouldn't have even survived without standards because they need to have a way for your computer to render a page, it's a standard, to connect over a network to another computer, which is another standard. So standards is the way to do this. And it's really been a pleasure and a privilege in my career is to be able to kind of sit at the front seat of taking our organizations and helping us navigate new use cases around standards-based technology so that basically lifts the tide on everybody. So now I can go build a device and I don't have to build a mobile phone for you to connect to because I've already got one. So I can just use the standard to connect those two. So definitely building on standards is a great thing. We're working on it. We're not all the way there, but that's really our remit over the next 5 to 10 years is expanding use cases.
That's awesome. What's the install base right now of NFC?
I don't know. I mean, you can see numbers all over the place. It's basically any mobile phone that's been bought within the last 5 to 10 years. So it's billions of devices that have
Yeah, because
NFC
I
built
think
into
that's
them.
close to $1 billion a year of just phones, of new
Yeah,
phones.
it's just phones, just phones. You got wearables. Almost every wearable
Yep.
now has it built into it. And then of course you have the payment terminals; they have it built into it as well. And then of course the new use cases are really around access control, so door
Yeah.
locks, cars, automotive, like the Car Connectivity Consortium work. USI is working, the Universal Standards, Universal Stylus Initiative is
Yep.
working on ways to do it into styluses as a standard-based technology on tablets. So it really is happening everywhere across the electronics marketplaces around NFC. And the reason why is, like I said, people see it as being very secure. I already have half the connection. There's a friend of mine I used to work with a long time ago, who used to always talk about how the importance of radios is to have two of them, because if you only have one, it's the sound of one hand clapping, which is not very interesting. So
Yeah.
the good news, if you're building NFC-based technologies, you can be pretty, well, you can depend pretty highly on the fact that someone's going to have the other half of that connection because they probably have a mobile phone that they're already built into it. And so it's a really exciting space. And of course, wireless charging, which is something we'll talk about here too,
Sure.
is something we're also working on as well. And
Yeah.
wireless power, I should say, because there's a little bit of a nuance there that might be good to get into as well.
Well, let's do it. You're doing my job for me. That's where I wanted to go next. So one of the future technologies for the NFC Forum that's already happening, but it certainly has a lot of room to run and a lot of room to grow, is wireless power and wireless charging, and also leveraging that secure wireless data that NFC has as its core value prop. So where did this get started within the NFC Forum? What was kind of the light bulb moment of we need to get into this? What's called the WLC portion of NFC?
Well, let me tell you that happened prior to my arrival, so I have nothing to do with it. Some really bright engineers, I know a couple of them that I won't name them because I don't want to leave somebody out, if you will. But basically, all the NFC technology is power harvesting. So the way for people to understand this is that, hey, if I've got a mobile phone, I'm sorry, better example, a contactless card and I go to pay for something,
Yep.
the terminal will read it at the, when I'm at the cash register. But what people don't think about is there's no battery in the card.
Sure.
And what's happening is there's wireless transfer of power. So what happens is somebody walks up, gets in close proximity, and then the radio on the other side will power that device. So, power harvesting is what we like to call it.
Right.
So somebody thought about that for a while and said, well, I wonder how far we can push that in terms of wattage. And by the way, why don't we do as opposed to tap, why don't we do a set and rest use case? And then what could we do with that? Basically is the way I think this all came about. And so today we have a standard that allows you to get up to 1 watt negotiated power, up to 1 watt, for powering devices. And we have named it wireless charging. And we've been having conversations about maybe changing the name of it to wireless power, because wireless power allows you to charge as well as do powering of devices, whereas wireless charging is really kind of the set and rest. Because what we are already starting to see happen is that, okay, so there is wireless charging. They're kind of, I would say, kind of initial products in the market today that use it for charging. But we've also seen some pretty good examples of using wireless power. Yep. And the idea here, and the best example for people to understand is, imagine that padlock on your shed or at some door that you need to get into.
Like this?
Like that, a padlock. Well, a padlock, it would be really not very smart to have a battery in it because you have to swap it out all the time. And you really don't need the battery that often. You only need it when you need to unlock the mechanical lock.
Well, so let me add on top of that, Mike, it's not just that you don't need it, it's that when you're putting it in a lock, a lot of those are storing things that are in very, variable or harsh environments. And so we've talked to companies that won't even use for padlocks or for door locks. They won't even conceive of doing a smart lock because batteries degrade so quickly in cold weather. And so it's not just it's not just convenience, it's also opening up a whole new category of opportunity.
That's very fair, and it's a very good view from from the street in terms of what's really happening. Well, to finish the use case for those that would not know already, of course, if they're following you guys, they probably do. But the use case here would be, as I use my phone as a power bank. So I would walk up to the padlock, hold my phone in proximity for a couple of seconds, and then it would unlock the lock. So I get the use case of access control of unlocking. Plus, then when I remove the phone from the lock, it would now go back to a stateless situation where there's no power. So it's more secure. There's all kinds of benefits of looking the way we might be able to use wireless power for things like padlocks, for instance, is one example.
I agree, and this was completely unscripted, but if you don't mind, I'll just show people how it works. So you gave the
No, go ahead.
theoretical and the standard version. So here's an NFC padlock. It's fully metal, nice heavy duty, with the exception of this RF transparent front. And then here I have an app. This is with our partners at Infineon. Sorry, that's a little tough to see. We'll put a picture up when we do the video. And I'm just going to hold these together. I'm going to hit unlock. And what's happening is the phone is transmitting power, and you hear it click, and there we go. It's open. So there's no battery on this lock, and it is able to do all of the cool functionality of a smart lock, like know when it's been jostled with. It's able to take a log, so it can send information to like the IT security people. It's very smart.
Well, you know, absolutely. Well, like there's some other use cases around this. Not we could do a whole
sure
podcast on this, but the idea is that like so some things that people don't think about, like in that use case. So the app that that demo app you've seen from Infineon, if someone did a high volume use case of that application, for instance, that device already has an internet connection. So it's very easy for you, like you say, to log it and then save it in the cloud. The analogy I've given to some people around, I have talked to some people that are working on door locks, like at your residence, that have the same use case. I hold my phone and it uses the power of my device, as opposed to like lots of them, like the one I was considering buying has like 4 AA's in it that you have to replace every 4 months because of how long the batteries don't last. So you've got a sustainability value. And then the example I gave to a lot of people is like, when you buy a door lock, you don't go down to the local Home Depot and they take a copy of your key and keep it in the cloud. You get a copy and you take it with you. And so the idea that we're going to have all of our door locks and IoT stored in the cloud, there's all kinds of security issues. I mean, there's just a lot of things that I could get I can get all of the benefits plus additional ones by just having a static device that just sits there and I power it with my mobile phone. So this is the use case of wireless power. And of course, the other one, which we talked about, was wireless charging. And that's more for the traditional types of devices, like say your headphones, a way for you to be able to let the thing sit and rest and then take that power harvesting over an extended period of time to charge up a battery.
Yeah, and at that level, so for wireless charging, when NFC, as you mentioned, it always is doing power harvesting, so it can activate a passive device like a credit card. But the power levels are on the order of a few milliwatts there. And when we're doing wireless power or wireless charging to charge a lithium ion battery for something like a Whoop device, which uses NFC charging at 1.2 watts, you're talking about multiple orders of magnitude of more power. And I think that's where NFC WLC really is pushing some innovation to try to increase the magnitude of power transfer so that you have efficiency and ultimately so that there's a better user experience with devices.
Yeah, but one of the things that I know you wanted to talk about, and I'll just quickly mention. So, what are some of the things we're working on? So, like most standards bodies, we have different working groups that have different functions. The analog digital working group is the group right now that looks at power solutions. And they have 2 big work items right now that they're focused on. The first one is around increasing range. So NFC Forum technology today is 5 millimeters. And they're looking at ways we can increase the range. Not a long way, but 4 or 5 times. 5 millimeters is a good distance for increasing the usability of the technology, if you will, particularly in contactless and access control type of use cases. But the other thing they're working on is power up to 3 watts. And so I know the group is looking for volunteers to help with that work to again solve these problems. The one thing I would also say, I don't know if you have any good models on this or metaphors, because I've been struggling with this, is that, it was an interesting story. So I met up with an organization of well-known device manufacturer that's got a stylus, that's got, NFC technology built into it. About some of the challenges that they have kind of selling that idea internally. And one of the things they were talking about is that people look at a stylus and they look at NFC wireless power and they think, oh, it's only 1 watt. That's not very much. And then look at Qi and say, well, it's 5, and it's going to be 5 times faster, all this kind of stuff, or more, exactly. And so what was interesting though as part of the story is this particular product manager encouraged me to tell the story that people need to rethink the use case of how they charge things. So the example he gave is this is not their device, this is my Apple Pencil.
Yep.
But they said in our particular product, he asked me, how long do you think it takes to charge this device for 3 hours of use? 3 hours of continuous use of a stylus. How long do you think that takes on an NFC wireless power, like the 1 watt? I'm like, I don't know. He says it takes about a minute. And I'm like, okay, wait a second. I hadn't thought about this because, like, I don't, it's not like I got to sit there and charge my stylus to full. I just need to charge it enough so I can write until I set it back on the side of my notebook, which is basically all the time, and keep it charged. So, I think a lot of people, there's a lot of reasons to look at NFC wireless charging, but I think also the mental model is another piece of this puzzle, along with all the other things I know we're going to talk about.
Yeah, it's interesting. You asked for an analogy, and I think there's a macro trend going on right now with a shift towards more people adopting EVs. So electric vehicles and the way that they charge those at home. So, the mental model is totally shifting in that domain. And I think that will bring more exposure to the idea of how to power sip, how to take like little drinks of power versus always needing to go from the combustion vehicles. We basically drive them down to zero. We spend 10, 15 minutes at a gas station. We fill them all the way up to full, and then we drive them down to zero again. But with EVs, you pull into the garage, you plug it in, and maybe by the time you leave the next day, you're at 75%, but you're only running errands for 10 miles that day. And it's all fine. And you kind of equalize this. And thankfully, there's also software to manage it. So I think power sipping, and I love your example. I think it's definitely a direction that people are gaining a lot more exposure to.
Yeah, I would say that, and we've had kind of an interesting EV life ourselves in my own personal family, but I would say that, I think the problem is that most of us, our mental model for battery powered mobile devices is our mobile phone, and it never seems to last long enough. And by the way, and then what's really funny is if you sit down and go to, which I don't know what screen it is, but there's a screen you can go to on your phone that'll show you all the apps that are on air all the time.
Yep.
So, while you're just sitting there having a cup of coffee with your friend, you're using a ton of power, to check background things that aren't really necessary to be checking. So it really is this idea of like the thing that we use most often with the battery goes down pretty quickly, but it's not the same as these other mobile accessories. Like these things, I don't wear them for 8 hours at a time. I mean, I do when I'm on flight, on like a flight internationally, but other than that, most of the time it's for an hour, pop it off, toss it back in the charger, and like you really just kind of power sip all day long.
Yeah, absolutely. So the future and where we're going. So you talked a little bit about trying to move up to 3 watts. This and it's public that HP has the HP Poly Voyager surround headsets where you can just take them off and hang them, and it's NFC power into the headband. So it's completely invisible charging. That's the big user experience breakthrough. You can do invisible charging and device firmware updates over that same NFC link. It's like magic. That's at 2.6 watts. And it really wasn't limited by how much more power. It was limited by that was the right target for this application. So I think we're already there in terms of showing that it's possible. What's it going to take for the standard to move up the overall specification from 1 to 3 watts, even when the technology is proven in there?
Well, I think that, normally I would say, and I'll make this statement for all technology standards and all technology in general, usually the impediment to progress is your commitment to backward compatibility. How much of the current stuff do you want to still work and go into this new place? And so I think that sometimes it's more political than engineering, if that makes any sense. The rate of pace of change. The technology, as you mentioned, conceivably does support this already. It's really just a matter of kind of deciding how much of that's going to be backward compatible to existing, vendors, solutions, and those types of things. And there's a lot of politics happening right now around wireless power because Chiefs had a lot of success and well deserved. We're a close partner with them. They're looking at NFC technology for some of their next standards. Power for, by the way, for the data channel you just mentioned, something that listeners may not follow very closely, but it is a radio connection, so you can read and write data, so you can determine a lot of information before you power up. well, one, is there something here? That's one important thing to know about wireless power, that I can accept my power. And then also, like I say, software updates. There's also the ability to do encryption. There's also do handshaking to say only powerful devices made by my manufacturer. There's all kinds of goofy stuff you could do over that data connection. So with all technology, I think you're going to see some edge kind of proprietary solutions. And over time, a couple of those will become more mainstream. And then we'll have kind of the final battle in the standards group is the one we're going to go with, because it is kind of a mix of market, market success that plays a role, I think, in moving these things along. And then I will also tell you, just in honesty, the digital analog working group's really been working on range extension, which has been a pretty big effort. By the way, similar types of conversations about backward compatibility and those types of things. And so, when you have an installed base of billions of devices, you can't just kind of lightly make a decision about moving to a different radio technology. There was discussions early on. How do we go to more of an ultra wideband based technology or stay where we are? But all of those decisions are like, hey, payment is where we're at. It's built into every phone. Let's move out from there, as opposed to pick some new place and try to work back. So that's been where it's at. So, but I would say for anyone that's interested in up to 3 watts on the device side, you need to come to the NFC Forum, because those conversations are happening now. And become a member and join this working group and have your voice be heard as to how we're going to do this and when it's going to happen.
Well, that's great. That's a good way to end the substantive portion. I have 3 outgoing questions for you. You weren't prepped for these, so you can blame me later. What was your favorite Olympic sport to watch this year?
I watched none of it.
No Olympics? Now, for someone that ran for Congress, that's not the very political answer there.
Well,
you have to
I would say this will date this podcast, but as I was telling Jacob before we started, we just bought a house. And so for the past month, I've been at this place till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, painting and building walls and tearing wall board down and backsplatting like you would not believe the number of stuff I've been doing. So keeping an eye on the Olympics has been kind of low priority.
I got you. That makes a lot of sense. I'll throw one out there for you.
Go ahead.
That opened my eyes. I did not expect to. I didn't know this was a sport. I didn't expect to love it. There's the artistic gymnastics, which I thought was just one person ribbon twirling. There's team, and they throw these gold hoops around, 5 of them. And if you think coordinating a standard is hard, or getting different organizations to come together, just watch this. And literally, we should just hire the coach of any of these teams, and they'll just put it together in about 1 day, because the coordination is unbelievable.
Yeah, I'll tell you, this is going to sound like a very strange place to go, but in high school, when my eldest son was in high school, he was in marching band, and a lot of the athletes, I think, made fun of people. In fact, I even did when I was in high school, of people in marching band. But after seeing him go through that experience, and they went to Grand Nationals, and they were a really high-end marching band in high school. And it's as I told locals, putting together, I don't remember exactly, a 15-minute program where everyone is exactly where they're supposed to be at exactly the right moment while playing an instrument and playing music is far more complicated than playing, left guard on the high school football team, because you can screw up half the time and no one even knows. But if you screw up, and you're the third saxophone player, it can have very major consequences in a marching band. So I agree with you. Yeah. Coordinating something like that for one moment is actually, I think, harder than having actual performance over an extended period of time.
Very true. I agree. All right, question 2. What's your favorite way to use NFC today? Or what do you use the most? What do you use the most?
Well, I by far use the most my watch to pay.
Okay.
So
Apple Watch.
My Apple Watch. So I play this game when I travel, and I try not to pull my credit card out of my wallet. Yeah. And when I go abroad, that's easier. And in fact, actually, the last time I was in London, I only took it out one time, and that was to check into the hotel, because they wanted to actually see my physical card. But the entire rest of the time, whether it be traveling, getting on the train, going into a shop, buying lunch, like any of that stuff, all of it is done contactless. So the one thing that I'm moving into this new house, the thing I'm in the market for right now is a lock. Because when I take the dog out for a walk, I'd like to be able just to tap on the way when I get back, as opposed to opening the garage door or something like that. So I'm in the market for some door locks, but and I've tried a couple of them. But another thing I'm looking for is I'm really looking for someone to do something that's powerless. In other words, one that doesn't have a battery. Because I do think there's some really interesting use cases, but I think I'm about a year away from those types of mainstream products.
Yeah, I agree that you are, and you probably know the companies too. We can talk offline if you're looking for something there. And then my last question, given you're in home repair, getting moved in mode, most essential tool in your tool bag right now.
Oh, I'll tell you what. Well, my cordless drill, but I'm going to supplement.
Wait,
that.
what
So
brand are you on? What you like? I've learned that the power tool business is more
I'm not
brand
a
loyal than
snob.
cigarettes. Okay.
No, I'm not a snob about that. 15 years ago, I bought a Ryobi rechargeable drill,
Okay.
and so that battery fits on other stuff. So that's what
Uh-huh.
happened. But here's what I would tell you. So probably for the last decade, I've always been intrigued by the idea of having a multi-tool because it looks like a pretty cool thing. And so my project this last night was pulling tile off of my backsplash. And I was talking to this guy, and he's like, "Well, what you should do is just cut the drywall off the wall because no reason to pull. You have to repair the drywall anyway. So why just cut
Take
it
it all
out and
off.
just go down
Yeah.
to the studs?" And so I'm like, "Huh." And I'm like, "I've always wanted to buy a multi-tool. I wonder how that works." So I went and bought one, and then I came home and watched a 6-minute video on how to use it. I'm like, "Okay, this now." And by the way, the first 10 minutes I was pretty timid because I didn't know what I was doing. But after I got the hang of it, I'm like, this is a game changer. Like being able to cut through. I mean, I started pulling a tile at a time, and then I was pulling off like 1 foot sections at a time, and then it was 20-inch sections at a time. I mean, it was pretty awesome. So I would say multi-tool is kind of at the top of my list now. But I'll tell you, all of these things have in common is they use wireless power, not to loop it all the way back, but like, I mean, I bought a circular saw while I was out. I also bought I found a shop vac that uses the same battery as my multi-tool. So I have a shop vac, and actually that all started, not to take this even longer, that all started when I started camping. So when I was pulling a trailer, one of the things I wanted was a air compressor so I could do my blowout and air up my tires anywhere. And so I found one that was battery powered. And so now that's been kind of my base battery that I use for all these. And like I got 5 devices now that all use the same battery. And it's a pretty big game changer because you don't have the cables. You have to worry about wire connectors. You just basically charge up the battery and snap it in and go. It's pretty awesome.
All right. Well, you talked about a game you play when you travel, which is to see how few times you take out your credit card. I have a new game. See how much you can redo your kitchen with just the multi-tool. Let's see how that goes. You can report back.
Well, I'm almost done. So I mean, I guess I kind of cheated because I did drill all the holes for the cabinets for the little. So that would be very difficult to do with a multi-tool. But taking out the tile, that was incredible. I cannot believe it. So.
All right, Mike. Well, thank you so much. Very insightful. I appreciate it. And hopefully we'll talk about some updates to this maybe in the next 6 to 12 months. We'll talk about it again and see where the industry's going. I appreciate it.
I'm very, very excited. And thanks to all the folks at New Current doing all the great work you guys are doing there. So have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.